bienvenue. Hello, welcome to another video. I have the video for this week. And this week we are doing another Anais Nin. We are having a look at a book, a posthumously published book, Miller and June. So that is the book that we are having a look at this week. Before we get started, if you like this channel, if you want to support it so that we can make more of these videos, come across to our shop. We have books, and on our Redbubble shop we have all sorts of other things that you may find interesting, all sorts of writing merch, books, writing things to help you with your writing, all sorts of stuff, so many things now that I cannot all them up, and we cannot talk about all of them all in one go. So have a look at both of our shops. There are links down below. So that is that done. And now we have our book. So we have another book by Anais Nin. This is a writer that we have looked at before. We had a look at some of erotica, so you can go back and have a look at that maybe. But this is the book that I wanted to have a look at before we have a look at other fiction. Parce que she is very much known as a diarist rather than a fiction writer. Although for me, I am not particularly interested in the diaries as such, so I read her fiction rather than her diary. So that is what we will have a look at. However, this one is one that is from her diary, and we will have a look at that, partly because it is significant, but also because this year we want to have a look at Henry Miller, who is the Henry of Miller and June. I want to look at Henry Miller, and I thought that this would be a good way to introduce Henry Miller via another writer. Henry Miller and Anais Nin were friends for subsequent to this for the rest of their lives. So this is the beginning of the relationship that they have. So what is this? What is this, you may ask? And well, this is the diary of a year-long affair that Anais Nin had with June Mansfield and Henry Miller. Yes, you heard that right. With both the husband and the wife. Oui. And I told you in the last video that in the end of her life, Anais had a husband on either coast of the United States, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast. Oui. So she, this was not an isolated incident for her. I think it was the only time that she had two husbands at once, but she certainly took lovers. And while most of her lovers were men, she did not object to taking the odd woman as a lover. And so this book is about that affair. Henry and June are not the only people that she takes as lovers in this year. And she is also married to her husband, the East Coast husband, Hugo, the banker, while this is all happening. So, she was very slippery little fishy. Very, very slippery little fishy. She also had an affair with her analyst. I will come back to that. I will come back to that. Now, part of what makes this such an interesting book is the way that Anais talks about her sensual and her sexual life. You cannot read this book and get much of a sense of Henry as a person outside of her version of Henry as a lover. So that is one thing. This is a very explicit book. Although it may not be graphic description, it is a book that very very fascinating too. And that is actually why I like this and why I like Anais in total. So although we have other books, other far more famous books, other books that have sold like the billion copies, little grey things, you know what I'm talking about. What makes this book stand out is the fact that she talks about sexuality in a very, very feminine language. Okay, so let me explain this. Although there are women who have written about sex from a female perspective, many of these books are, as a female reader, not very satisfying and certainly not very reflective of a female experience, because the women involved have an internalized male gaze. What does that mean? That means that I would not say that they have an internalized misogyny, because I do not think it is an internalized misogyny, parce que they have an internalized male gaze. They are writing about the sexual act from a female perspective, but with always in their mind how this seems to the man and how they seem to the man. Whether or not the audience is meant to be the men's or the women's, it does not seem to matter. It is an internalized idea that's a male point of view and that's a male concept of how a female partner should act in such a circumstance is of paramount importance. And so those stories have a tendency to feel terribly self-sacrificing, sort of self-effacing, the idea of giving and giving and giving, and that it is that the pleasure is all in the giving, which flatters very much a male ego that it is giving the pleasure, that a woman is gaining pleasure from giving the pleasure. That is what is traditionally seen as the role of the female in the partnership. This book, Anais, does not do that. Anais is exceptionally feminine. Feminine to such an extent that it is almost uncomfortable, because so many readers have internalized the male gaze. okay? When she talks about the encounters with the other people, her descriptions are not on the partner, they are on herself. And this has given rise to people reading her as incredibly selfish. However, when you read a man, for instance, Henry Miller, talking about sex and talking about sex in a way that is very self-focused and ignoring the even the personhood of the other partner. No, we do not have any problem with that because we have the internalized male gaze. We have a degree of internalized misogyny where that is so normal and normalized that we do not see that. Anais is merely taking the same position as a man, but describing it in incredibly feminine language and experience. When I say that she is incredibly feminine, what do I mean by that? She is not passive. She is not passive, but she is receptive. There is a difference between being passive and letting someone do something to you and being receptive to the actions and moving with a partner. It is like a dance. In her perspective, she is the partner who is being led. So she gives the male partner, or even in the case of June, she sees June as a dominant partner and she prefer, which means it is active choice, therefore not passive. She prefer to be the partner who is led. Just with dancing, someone has to be the initiator, the lead in the dance, and the other one has to receive that and flow with that. And to have that written about sex, it is incredible. It is not a language that we very well see. Often the language that we have is one of domination, and the idea that the feminine is weaker and needs to be dominated, and that is the internalized male gaze and the internalized misogyny that says, oh, I need to be dominated, I need to give the pleasure. No, the person who is the receptive, the person who is dancing, is also getting pleasure of their own that they are focused on. And that is what makes it so I think, shocking and so an affront to a small ego. Because I have seen when I was looking about this and about I have seen many people throw great shade on Anais Nin. Great shade. Mostly of the male variety showing great shade. She is, as a diarist, it reads very self-centered. It is a diary. It is a diary. Of course it is self-centered. Mais when we read a diary of a man, we do not say the same thing because we are led to believe that that is normal. That should be prioritized. But the internal world of a woman prioritized, oh no, she is being selfish. No, I will not say she is angel. I will never say she is angel. She had many problems. Mais that does not mean that she is somehow worse or should be judged harsher because she did not fit a stereotype. And that is the other thing that is interesting in this. She begins to see an analyst, one of at least two analysts, and while Anais Nin does credit the analysts and psychoanalysis that she did with allowing her to be as creative as she was magnificently creative, there is in the conversations that she records with the analyst a tendency on the part of the analyst to expect her to conform to a more traditional concept of female sexuality. Of course, this is compromised by the fact that Anais Nin had affairs with both her analysts, which again seems to have been a problem that was baked into psychoanalysis from the very beginnings. Although it is supposed to be a position where an analyst is not going to fall for the temptations of the patient, the history of psychoanalysis has a rather sporty ethics. From Freud, there is a theory that Freud misunderstood the revelation of abuse that many women had suffered as fantasy, because he could not face the possibilities that these women were suffering because they had been abused, sometimes as children. And so he assumed that this is all the fantasy and the creating of the neurosis, which is a problem because it's reflected in the psychoanalytic theory for many other psychoanalysts. There is also this absolutely appalling power imbalance. Now, Anais Nin was evidently a woman, with a very, very high sex drive. She talks of having 4 men in one day at one point. Or at least 2, certainly 2, but sometimes more than that. So she is a woman who has a very high sex drive. She was also a woman who felt a great deal of her power was in being seductive and being attractive. Now, for an analyst who knows this and knows that she will use this as leverage as the analysis becomes more personal, that she will deploy naturally her defense mechanism, which for her did involve her sexuality and her using her sensuality. For the male analyst to then succumb, which is what they would call it. I would call it that they betrayed their ethics and they slept with a patient. The male analyst is supposed to understand, or any analyst is supposed to understand, that this is not an actual common, but that they have power and that the patient is engaging in a power struggle. The fact that they entirely betrayed their professional power and predated on what was, in those moments, a clearly vulnerable person, because she is deploying her defense mechanism against the things that they are saying and things that she does not want to face, and the fact that they exploit that for their own sexual gratification, regardless of whether she initiated or whether she enjoyed, is irrelevant. They were predatory. And yet it is all her fault. It is all her fault. There's so many people I have seen talking about the fact that she was so predatory as a woman. No. In terms of her animals, that is not predation on her part, that is predation on their part, and it's part of the reason that form of psychoanalysis developed such a bad reputation, because it had a possibility of being exceptionally predatory towards the female patients that it was supposed to serve. Now, Anais Nin does not seem to have suffered any great ill from this, apart from the fact that they clearly compromised her analysis, and the fact that she felt that she needed to, rather than engage with those parts of herself that she wished to avoid, she used her advantages to defend that. So in that way, it did her harm, because she was never able to resolve certain things for herself as a result, which no doubt led to further behavior which may or may not have been destructive to her life and her creativity. But I would like you to look at this also. This is not a work of a true diary. Anais Nin rewrote her diaries multiple times. This is a creative artifact as much as any of the novels. So she is not a true diarist. She is not a Samuel Pepys. She is a creative force. There is truth in this, but it is not the literal truth. It is a sensual truth. So if you go into this admitting that A, you wish to look at a real female concept of sexuality, and B, that the who's and the wherefores and the whys and the historic factual things are going to be a little bit hazy. In fact, do not even think about the historical actual things. They did have an affair. It is about a relationship. The relationship is truthful. The historicity of it is not truthful. So that is Henry and June. I will be bringing you some more of both Anais Nin and Henry Miller in the future. And until then, au revoir. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.